Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. So back when I was considering originally looking into number 6, I did a poll on Patreon to see if people wanted me to react to the manga or the anime. And I had a third option in there being like, I'll watch the anime, but then I'll go back and read the manga and do a soapbox afterwards. And that's the option that won. A lot of people have told me going into this series, they're like, I like the anime a lot, but the manga's better. And so I was like, okay. And then I've had other people tell me, when you get to the end of the series, the ending in the manga is different than the ending in the anime. And I was like, okay. So going into this show, I kind of had some foreknowledge of what was to come and what to expect, which didn't hurt the viewing experience at all. But in the back of my head, the whole time I was like, I can't wait to read the manga. And especially at the end of the series. Like, I like number 6 a lot. But the ending, there are parts of it that I would change. And if you've watched my reaction, you know what I'm talking about. So going back and reading the manga has been an experience. I have spent the last several weeks slowly going through the manga. I have taken copious notes that I'm going to go over with y'all tonight and talk to you about basically what the similarities between the manga and the anime are, what the differences are, talking about what the anime actually did well. There are parts of the anime that I like better than the manga, and then there are parts of the manga, obviously, that I like better than the anime. And then basically, which do I prefer? And that's a hard question, so we're saving it for the end. But please note that there will be spoilers within this soapbox episode talking about the number 6 manga. There's gonna be spoilers, so if you've not watched the series, you can go to my channel, go to the playlist, and there's a playlist for number 6, and you can watch my reactions there leading up to this. But with that being said, I started out reading the manga, and I got up to volume 3 around the time that episode 6 aired. And so far, everything in volumes 1 through 3 had covered up to episode 6. And so I was like, okay. And then as I got into episode 7, I read one more volume, and I was like, okay, I need to stop because it was getting right to the end and starting to go into some uncharted waters. So first of all, talking about the similarities, if you are wanting to read the manga at the same time you're watching the anime, you can basically read volumes 1 through 3 and get up to episode 7, and you won't have anything that's spoiled or different. And you can even get into volume 4 after you've watched episode 8, and volume 4 pretty much covers everything in episode 7 too. The biggest difference between the manga and the anime is how everything is organized and structured. You can definitely, I'm glad that I watched the anime first, because going back and reading the manga, I'm like, oh, this has been rearranged here, and this has been rearranged here. One thing that I think the anime does do well in comparison to the manga is that it basically condenses a lot of repetitive interactions. Like, there's a lot of repetitive trips for Shion to go see Inukashi. There's a lot of repetitive trips of Inukashi and Regika conversing. There's a lot of repetitive incidents where they go into West Block or they go back to the apartment. There's repetitive incidents, and there are conversations that happen that are unique enough to make it engaging. But I do like that the anime kind of streamlined a lot of those moments and sort of made the plot a little bit more flowy, streamlined, fluid's the word I'm looking for. And it all kind of flowed a lot better. Do I wish the anime were longer? Yes, because as I've said, once you get to volumes 1 through 4 basically cover episodes 1 through 7, but then you have volumes 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You have 5 volumes that are supposed to cover episodes 8, 9, 10, 11. There's so much left out and so much changed that you really, once you get to volume 5, things definitely start to go differently with the plot. And that's kind of where the manga shines for me, is how they treat the last act of the story differently than how the anime treats it. Basically, the anime just needed to be 15 episodes. If it were 15 episodes long, I think they could have included everything they needed to, and it would have been fine. But they didn't do that. It was only 11 episodes. So let's talk about this. So going through my notes here with volume 1, with volume 1, there's not really a whole lot that has changed too much. The biggest thing, and I will say that this is probably the biggest addition that the anime does that I love compared to the manga, and that is the angle about the grandmother. So in the actual volumes of the manga, the grandmother is mentioned. She knits Safu and Shion the matching sweaters. Safu keeps her sweater, and Shion gives his sweater up to Nezumi. And she dies just like she does in the anime, But the way that they treat her in the manga is she's barely there. And that was one of the most compelling aspects about the anime, was the fact that the grandmother was Safu's connection with humanity. And that's really what, because when you first meet Safu, she's really nerdy, she's very scientific, she's very sanitized, she kind of is a product of the number 6 system, and she thinks everything's all great and wonderful. And she's just very clinical about everything, about sex, about relationships. She just views everything in a very sanitized, clinical way. And her grandmother is her tie to humanity, because her parents aren't alive. It's just her and her grandmother. So there's all this dialogue between Safu, Shion, and the grandmother early on in the first couple of episodes. And then Safu has those continued conversations with her grandmother, and her grandmother gives her the sewing needle, and she keeps it and all that. That's not in the manga, which I was very frustrated by, because I found myself when I was watching the anime, if you've watched episode 6's reaction, then you know that I had a really personal connection to the anime while watching, because my great-grandmother passed as I'm watching episode 6, which is when Safu's grandmother passed. So there's a scene in that episode where she goes to the visitation and her grandmother is there, and she's lamenting that she should have been there, and she should have been there for her grandmother, and she was gone, and she was studying abroad, and she wasn't there to support her. And when she goes to get the rest of her belongings, all that's there is a set of glasses. And there's nothing else there. Not the sewing needle, not the sweater, not all of her belongings. And it's that moment in the anime that Safu starts to question number 6 and the entire society, and is like, why didn't they keep her things? What's going on here? And she starts to notice everything around her, and that's when she tries to contact Shion and realizes that he's not in the system anymore. In the manga, she is studying abroad, her grandmother passes, and she goes to the visitation, but we don't get that important scene with the box, with the glasses, with the sewing needle. We don't get those scenes. And then she's basically sitting in the park grieving, and she just decides to call Shion out of the blue to talk to him, and that's when she figures stuff out and starts to question the city. So I feel like in the anime, the grandmother angle was a lot more fleshed out, and it had a bigger impact, especially on Safu's character. And there's going to be a moment way later in the manga that we're going to come back to and talk about the grandmother there. So I was disappointed that the grandmother wasn't in the manga as much. That's one aspect I think the anime does better, but it's a small aspect, but still kind of a crux of Safu's entire storyline. So there's a lot more characters in the manga, mainly with the government. There's a government official that basically is the one that takes Shion into custody after his coworker dies. The Yaoman, his brother-in-law, he's a character in the series. We get more characters fleshed out, and they're all minor. They don't have any major roles except for the scientist and Rashi, I think it's Rashi, the main guy that's a security bureau agent. They come back in towards the end of the series and have a bigger role. But they're kind of set up in the beginning as being our antagonists. Our main characters haven't interacted with them yet. So in Volume 1, it is revealed that the government knows exactly what it's doing. It's covering up the parasitic wasps, and Shion becomes privy to that. And also we find out that Shion realizes there's a wasp inside his neck. In the manga, Shion knows it's there. It's gross. I hate it. I hated that part early on. I was like, nope, because it's one of my biggest phobias, is just parasitic things inside of me. No, thank you. And so reading that, I was like, awesome, cool. But Shion makes the comment in the manga that they're feeding off of me, and I'm like, no, absolutely not. But pretty much Volume 1, beat for beat for the anime, other than those little aspects. In Volume 2, I will note that Nezumi, in the anime, they're holding hands when they stay in the bed. In the manga, they are hugging each other, and they're embracing each other. So there's that difference. And in the chat, when Shion first talks to him after he runs off with Nezumi and then talks to her later, in the chat, she tells Shion that she loves him. So she does tell him that she loves him early on. It's just she doesn't quite have the same feeling to it that she does later in the series. So in Volume 2, there's a bit of a difference. By Volume 2, Shion has gone through the transformation where his hair has turned white and he has the red, they call it the red snake that goes up across his body, and his eyes have turned red. And in the manga, we're introduced to these 2 kids early on that are just members of West Block, and one of them has the same name as his mother, and Nezumi jokes with him that that's why Shion has taken a liking to her, because it has the same name as his mom. But they call him Snake. They call him Snake based on his appearance. And so there's that little hint early on. I talked in the reactions about Shion being kind of like the snake in the Garden of Eden, and Nesmi being called Eve, and so it's a very interesting bit of symbolism there, but it's a little bit more noticeable in the manga. Other things that are different in volume 2 is the pupa of the wasp is actually a lot smaller in the manga, which you can get into more detail with the drawings. In the anime, they make it bigger to kind of give it more scale, but it's a lot smaller in the manga. And there's a lot more flirtation with Nezumi and Shion. Nezumi quotes more Shakespeare in volume 2 to him and is talking about all these like flourishing language and flowery poetry and things like that. And Shion also makes the comment about humans saving other humans, and Nezumi kind of dismisses him and is like, I don't know. There's a really interesting note in volume 2 where Nezumi makes this cool symbolic comparison that he thinks he's been infected by Shion, which I find very interesting considering we have the whole parasitic wasp angle, where he says he's been infected by Shion. And then we get the scene where they go into the West Block, and in the marketplace, in the anime you see it briefly that there's a man with a gun chasing after somebody in the anime. In the manga, that's a whole scene. That is a whole scene where he chases down Shion and Nezumi, and there's this big thing with the woman that kissed Shion and all this, and then Rat basically, aka Nezumi, wants Shion to be able to defend himself. So there's a lot more in the West Block in volume 2 that we get than just them going to see Regika. It's all really expanded upon. We also have very early on, even back in volume 1, but it's established even more in volume 2, the idea that Shion has this voice inside of him that is telling him to destroy things. And it's quite disturbing because the way they do it in the manga is Shion's a kind and compassionate person like he is in the anime, but in the manga you constantly get these panels where this voice is in his head telling him to destroy, and you're like, that doesn't seem like Shion at all. And it kind of starts to tie back where Nezumi notices that he feels uneasy around Shion because something just doesn't seem right, and it has to do with that voice. And so it's very, very interesting. But this is where, at this point in the manga, around the end of volume 2, things with the plot line start to change and become altered. And so we have them meeting Inukashi, aka Doglome. Inukashi leads them to the Latch building where they meet Regika, and we don't ever find out. That's one thing. We don't ever find out in the manga or the anime who Shion's father is, which I am totally, for the record, fine with. I'm glad it's not Regika, it's not the scientist, it's not Ro, which we find out is the old scientist that has the same thing with Shion. It's not the mad scientist, it's not the security bureau guy, it's nobody from Organization X. We just don't know Shion's dad, and that's okay. We don't have to have an explanation for every family member, and I'm totally fine with that. It wasn't anything ridiculous, you know. But we do get to meet Regika early on in this part here too, and find out that Karan, which was Shion's mother, worked with the government when Number 6 was getting created, which is rather interesting. And then the man that named Nezumi is in the photo. We see that kind of little clue there, and his name is Ro, and we see him later on in the series. And then volume 2 ends with Sapphic finding out that her grandmother passed away while she's studying abroad. I want to bring up with volume 3 that it probably has, you've probably seen it in the thumbnail, but it has my favorite cover in the series, and that's this one with Nezumi as Ophelia when he's playing Eve. It's beautiful. I love this cover. It's probably my favorite in the whole series. There's one towards the very end that I'll show y'all again when we get to it, but I love this cover. It's so good. It's just, Nezumi looks so beautiful as Eve. It's just chef's kiss. And the sad thing is that in the manga we don't get the play scene. We don't get the scene where Nezumi is playing Ophelia. Apparently it was an extra that they just added into the anime, but it was like from a light novel. It wasn't actually from the manga. And I'm like, man, I'm really glad they added it because it's one of my favorite scenes in the anime is Shion and Regika going to see him perform. But yeah, it's not in the manga. I'm like, who knew? So we get to volume 3. And we establish that there are 2 men from Organization X that want to retrieve Shion and Rat. And one of them is the man who wants to dissect Rat and discover what all is inside of him. And that's pretty disturbing early on that these people want to capture Shion and Nezumi and dissect them. But they also say that they need to retrieve a quote-unquote female sample to hopefully find the pinnacle piece to become a holy city. So there's all this talk early on about Aurelius, and I'm going to say Eurilius because it may be pronounced differently, but that's just how I'm going to say it in this video. But early on, you get a little bit of hint at Eurilius that they're trying to discover this force and use it for the benefit of number 6. So you get little foreshadowing early on about that. One big difference in the manga from the anime is that the whole conversation that Shion gives to Nezumi about being drawn to him. In the anime, it's out in the desert after Nezumi has had an argument with Inakashi, but that's not how it goes in the manga at all. In the manga, it happens in the apartment. Like, we've not even gotten to the Inakashi brawl with Nezumi yet in the manga. In the manga, they show Shion in his apartment, and they're just having a conversation, very similar to like Haiji and Kakaru in Run with the Wind. And they're just having a conversation, and that's when Shion tells him that he's drawn to him. And it's so much more natural, and it flows so much better in the moment and seems more genuine when they're just kind of in this intimate setting. It's not just right after a battle, things like that. But we cut from that to Safu going to visit Shion's mother, and she does the whole spiel about how she likes Shion, she loves him, everything like that. And it's basically, that part's beat for beat for the anime, but the part where he says he's drawn to him, I think, is much more well done in the manga, and that's how we start off Volume 3. Chapter 9 of Volume 3, Nezumi discovers that he doesn't want to lose Shion, and so there's a lot more introspective with Nezumi and his thought process, and him going through this internal struggle of, do I like Shion, do I not like Shion, do I want to send him away, do I want to keep him closer? It helps to explain his rationale behind keeping the message from Karen about Safu later on. It gives it a lot more background. We then have chapter 10 in the manga, which is still in Volume 3, and right around the time of Volume 3, things really start to shift. Basically, the events of episodes 5 through 7 in the anime are shifted around in the manga. So we have this scene of actually Nezumi and his rats versus Inakashi and their dogs, which is pretty interesting. They could have had a whole scene of that in the anime, which would have been neat, but they don't. But yeah, Nezumi and Inakashi get into an argument, and instead of having just the brawl out in the desert of West Block like they do in the anime, they have it in this enclosed quarters, and Nezumi uses his rats against Inakashi's dogs, and it's a really interesting scene. But that part's different in the manga, and what's also different is that we cut to Karen meeting Yaoman, and Yaoman is the creepy reporter that we see him early on in the anime, and it's established that his niece likes to go to the bakery a lot and get stuff from Shion's mother. In the manga, we've seen the little girl in the bakery, but we have no clue that she's Yaoman's niece. In the manga, Karen has this whole moment like she does in the anime where she breaks down and she's starting to question number 6 and she wants to see her son, and the old lady comes up just like before. But in the manga, Yaoman rescues her, and he shows up with these crows. In the manga, Yaoman is represented by being shown with crows a lot of time, which I don't quite know the symbolism with the crows. It's very eerie and ominous, just like it is in the anime. Except the birds just kind of come with Yaoman wherever he goes. But he shows up and takes Karen away, and that's when he starts to tell her about number 6, and that he's part of this underground movement to try to expose all of the secrets that number 6 has had over the years. And up until this point in the manga, she has no clue who he is, whereas in the anime, she's known him since episode 1. But we get established early on in the manga that his wife and son went missing thanks to number 6, and he believes that number 6 killed them. And so since then, he's vowed this personal vendetta against them to try to take revenge upon the government. So it's very interesting that Yaoman just kind of pops up in Volume 3 and saves Karen, and then he just sticks around for the rest of the story. But I do like that we got him established a little bit earlier on in the anime. It kind of sets him up to saving her later on a little bit more. But it is interesting that he shows up with these crows, and that's kind of like his motif throughout the rest of the manga. Oh, yeah, and then there is a scene right when Yaoman's getting done talking to Karen, and one of those wasps buzzes past Shion's mom, and for a second in the manga, I was like, if that bee stings her and implants those bugs in her, nope. And at this point, we don't realize what's going on in the manga with the wasps. We still think it's something that just hasn't already happened, but they can sting you and implant the eggs in you. That's not the case in the manga. But in the moment reading Volume 3, I was like, oh my god, that little wasp buzzed past her. I'm like, ah. And so I got kind of freaked out. But luckily, nothing happens. And then Chapter 11 in Volume 3 ends with Shion finding Safu's coat. Safu tried to go back to Shion's mother and talk to her, and she got kidnapped by the Bureau, just like in the anime. And then Shion finds her coat and starts to question where she is. And that is where volume 3 ends. I will say that from here on, volume 4 through volume 9, things get a lot different than the manga. And so I'm going to start including more and more screenshots from the manga because, one, I really like them. The artwork's beautiful. But two, I want to show some of the more key elements and things that get pointed out. So, for example, volume 12, or volume 4, which is chapter 12, starts out, and Inakashi and Nezumi are having the conversation that they have in episode 7 about Inakashi saying, look, Shion knows what's going on. They found Safu's coat. He's planning on going and breaking into number 6. You need to do something about it. And Inakashi makes this really cool statement saying, Nezumi, you're just human. You know, there's not a lot a human can do, you know, for himself. There's only so much you can do. And Nezumi's just kind of like, and then Nezumi realizes what's going on, that he really does have feelings for Shion. He doesn't want Shion to go. And Inakashi's like, well, you're going to have to deal with it. And this panel right here is so bittersweet because Nezumi's like, I wish we'd never met. And you know that Nezumi doesn't mean it, but Nezumi's like, I wish we'd never met so that I didn't have these feelings for you and it didn't make it hard. And it's just such a sweet, sad panel. And it cuts to, it's such a great parallel because we have Nezumi saying, I wish I'd never met you, and thinking back on the past, and then he goes back to the apartment, and there's a scene where Shion's making dinner for him, and Shion, you know, we just had that moment of Nezumi saying, I wish I'd never met you, and Shion goes, I'm glad I met you, and it's like, it's just like the opposites, it's like, no! And that's when we get the kiss from, the goodnight kiss from Shion to Nezumi, which I like this version. I don't know, I'm conflicted, because I like both versions. I like that we actually get to see the kiss in the anime, and here it's just him leaning over and it's implied, but you know that's what he's doing. I may like the anime kiss a little bit more, but it happens here kind of in the same context. We get a little bit of inner dialogue with Shion kind of monologuing and saying, you know, Safu was dear to me, precious, and I like this. I loved her, and I've included the panel here for all you naysayers. I loved her like a best friend, like my own family, like my mother. Like, he loved her as a friend and family. It wasn't necessarily romantic, which you can argue based on what the manga says. He doesn't straight... We'll talk about this, what he feels for Nezumi. But here he says Safu was like a best friend, like family. And that's why he wants to go and save her. And then Shion kind of comes to Nezumi and says, look, you taught me, all these things you've taught me are the opposite of cruelty. I don't want to see this side of you where you're lying, kind of like what he says in the anime, because Nezumi tries to shrug him off and he's like, I don't care about you, and Shion's like, yes you do. So chapter 13 of volume 4 starts out, and we get a little bit more into what's going on with Safu, and it's kind of like a foreshadowing, but that really over-the-top doctor mad scientist man that you guys will see a panel of him later on, he's been our main antagonist behind the scenes this whole time. He comes up to Safu and says that they're going to operate on her, which is quite terrifying, and Safu has no clue what's going on. All she can focus on is Shion in that moment as they're operating on her. And then we cut to where Shion's talking about her being like the best friend and trying to negotiate his feelings, and how Nezumi's treated him the last chapter, trying to push him away. And then we meet up again with Inakashi and Regika to plan out everything like we see in the anime. And there is a character that's left out. Regika has a bodyguard. His name is Konk. And I almost wanted to call him Kronk from Emperor's New Groove, but his name is Konk. He's Regika's bodyguard, and he's just there for like a chapter or two. He's just kind of just present, but he is there. And then we have the same situation happen where they lure the man from number 6 out to find information. And so we have the same situation happen with Inakashi. I was really hoping that the manga wouldn't have it as blatant as the anime does, but they do. Inakashi gets, you know, assaulted by this man, and we have the same moment. And in the anime, it's not as clear, but the manga makes it much more explicit that Shion gives Inakashi a hug because Shion feels bad for Inakashi for getting, you know, assaulted like that while trying to feed information. And when he wraps his arms around Inakashi, he makes the comment of saying that, oh, Inakashi's arms are really shoulders are really slender. Like, and in the manga, it's implied that Shion maybe thought Inakashi was male the entire time, and is realizing that maybe Shion was incorrect. But Inakashi's non-binary, so it doesn't matter. They actually end up letting him go, which I was amazed. I didn't know what happened with him in the anime. I just figured they tied him up somewhere and left him, and then they had the whole cleaning incident happen, and the man died. But no, That's not what happens. Shion talks to the man and basically lets the man go under the assumption that he's not going to tell the scientist about them. And Shion makes a good point to the man. He's like, well, you can't tell the scientist in Organization X about us, because that means that they'll know you talked to us and told us information. And so you'll die anyway. So we know you'll keep this a secret. And the guy's like, crap, you're right. And Nezumi is wondering how Shion got the man to open up when he couldn't. And so Inakashi tells this really good story, which I've included here, about how, the cold wind made a man kind of bundle up and shrivel into himself, but then the sunlight made him reveal himself and shed his coat and shed his barrier. And so her story is basically an allegory for the fact that Nezumi, being cold and cruel, was not going to get that guy to open up and talk to them, but Shion, being warm and sunny, was what ended up making him do it. So it's an interesting metaphor, but it just makes Nezumi mad. I really like this cover of Shion bathing the dogs. It's what starts Volume 5 out. It's really nice. At the end of Volume 4, Nezumi had collapsed, and we don't quite understand why he's been collapsing. We do by the end of the manga, so that part was never really fully explained in the anime, but the manga is going to explain it to us, which is nice. But I do like the idea that at the beginning of this volume, we find out that it's not really the security bureau that's in charge of the cleaning, it's the health and sanitation department, which is interesting. So there's more departments with number 6 at work, keeping the peace, so to speak, and Shion and Nezumi and them are just kind of piecing everything together. In the manga, they call it a manhunt. They don't call it cleaning, they call it the manhunt, and it will tie back later when we get Nezumi's backstory about his whole entire people being wiped out, with the exception of Nezumi. But Volume 5 talks about the creepy doctor, and the creepy doctor has a scene where he says he's taken a shine to Safu. It's disturbing, it's gross, and and we find out that he wants to control the wasps. The wasps are not a government experiment, so that's like red flag number 1. The wasps are something that's just happening, but the government wants to control them, and I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. And so he thinks that Safu is a key to all of that, and that these people have been captured to try to also be part of the way that they're going to figure out how to control them. And the interrogated man goes back to number 6. He's captured by the Mad Doctor, and the Mad Doctor tries to get the interrogated man to confess what he's told them. He doesn't do it, and so they infect him with a wasp, and he ends up dying. We find out that the reason Nezumi collapsed is because he heard a song. And in the anime, they connect Nezumi and Safu together. In this, they're not connected yet. It happens later on. Nezumi, after waking up from hearing the song, that's when we get the dance scene. So the dance scene that happens way back in like episode 4 and 5 happens like episodes later in the manga, volumes later. And so Nezumi takes the time. He's like, oh, well, thanks for saving me, Shion. Let's dance. And he starts to teach him how to dance. And that's when we have the moment where Nezumi starts to question what Shion is, because Shion does the thing with his neck, and he's like, I don't know you fully. And it's this nice parallel where both Shion and Nezumi realize they don't exactly know each other. And so they can't fully trust each other and be open because they're not sure who each other is exactly. So it's a nice little foreshadowing for what's going to happen later on in the manga. But chapter 17 in volume 5 is when the cleaners show up and the manhunt begins. Shion mentions this thing called the Babylon Treaty and says that soldiers and weapons are banned in number 6 and that they have been since its inception, which is interesting. But the big change that happens in the manga, that is basically what happens in episode 9, is that the woman doesn't die that has the baby. She doesn't die. She's being taken as prisoner, and so she's like, save my baby. And so she gives the baby to Shion right before she's taken captive. And Shion wraps the baby with his blanket to the dog and sends it to find Inakashi. But yeah, the woman doesn't die. Yeah, so the manga at this point, when Nezumi and Shion are captured, and they're all crowded around there about to get hauled into the van, it's a lot more grisly in the manga. What ends up happening is that people get shot. Like the government officials just open fire on these people that were standing up, and Nezumi makes Shion duck so that he doesn't get hurt. And it's absolutely grisly. It's absolutely terrifying. And Shion sees these people just dying at his feet, and Nezumi's like, don't snap. Because Nezumi's seen him snap against Regika. He's seen that he has these violent tendencies like deep inside of him, and Nezumi's like, don't do it. And then Shion just kind of like is maintains his control for the time being, and they get hauled into the truck. Another grisly thing that happens is that while they're in the truck, a man next to them just dies. He just straight up dies from the shock of everything happening, and his dead body collapses onto Shion. Fun times. But they imagine what it's going to be like when Akashi finds the baby, and then we get to see that later on. It's interesting because Nezumi sings in the van just like he does in the anime, but because we didn't have the scene in the auditorium that was an extra, this is the first time that Shion's ever heard Nezumi sing. So there's a really beautiful panel of him watching Nezumi sing and realizing it's, you know, his voice is so beautiful. And he's like, that was amazing. And Nezumi's like, oh, my voice is kind of shot the auditory system in here. The acoustics aren't too good. And he tries to like downplay it. But it's a really, really beautiful scene that we get to see Nezumi singing for the first time, and it calms everybody down in the van. So unlike the anime, when they get to the correctional facility, in anime they just dump the bodies down the chute and that's that. But in the manga, oh no, we go full Holocaust, where we go through and they escort everybody out, they drag the dead bodies out and put them in a pile, and Shion like grabs a hold of Nezumi to walk him through, and they go through what's called a screening process, and the people that are weak or seem like they're about to pass out are like plucked from the group and killed instantly. And there's this heartbreaking moment where Shion is watching these people die around him, and he's like, I feel myself getting desensitized to all of this. And he's like grabbing hold of Nezumi, he's like, please keep me human. And it's like, and then not long after that, Nezumi's gonna tell him, he's like, I don't want you to change while you're here. And there's this beautiful shot where he's like, we're going to go to hell together and come back alive. And it's like, no. And then Shion's like, of course we are. We're going to go down together and everything's going to be fine. But the manga does a really good job of just illustrating how horrific everything is once they get into the correctional facility. And the anime did a really good job too. But Shion's whole thing, while he's down there, he's like, these people existed. They had lives. And number 6 took those lives away. And so it's just, it starts to crumple him and like his resolve and his heart. And Nezumi's like trying to stay strong and keep him grounded. There's a joke that Nezumi gives, because Nezumi is also having an internal monologue. And he's like, I don't understand Shion. He's like, I don't know how he can be so compassionate and soft and then also want to like destroy everything around him. Nezumi's like, I don't get it. I don't understand. But he's like, I've got to stick with Shion and hopefully help keep him sane and keep his humanity. And Nezumi threatens him. He's like, well, you're going to stick with me. Otherwise, I'm going to give you a goodnight kiss and leave you. And Shion's really confused by that. He's like, wait, what? and Nezumi's like, I'm just joking. But Shion's like, you're confusing me. And it's like, oh, you boys, just kiss and make up, you know? So we get to the scene with the bodies where they go down the chute. And Nezumi helps Shion climb the pile of bodies. And I will note that the sewing needle was anime only. Because we don't have the grandmother. I was going to come back to the grandmother in this. This is the first time, and I'm going to mention her one more time later on. But yeah, in the anime, Shion's climbing the pile of bodies, and he grabs the sewing needle, and that's like, oh my god, was that the grandmother's? Is the grandmother in that pile? That's an anime only thing. They don't do that in the manga. It's like, excuse me, show. Because that part was really disturbing, and the manga does not go there with it. But Nezumi helps him up. And then here's one of the biggest differences in the entire series is that episode 8, we go into those caves, and it seems kind of odd, right? In hindsight, going back to the anime, it seemed odd that Nezumi took Shion out of his way to these caves that were, you know, west of West Block, and then they went back into the city, and that's when the cleaning happens. No. In the manga, the caves are part of the correctional facility. They're like deep within the correctional facility. There's people that have escaped and they've kind of harbored and burrowed under the correctional facility and have been living there this entire time. And that's where Nezumi went when he was first taken to the correctional facility. He escaped and found those secret catacombs and was taken to Ro, who's the main old guy that was once the scientist. So it's very, very interesting, and we can assume that Ro created these catacombs with these other survivors after he himself escaped once he was bitten by the wasp and survived that infection. But there's a guy, his name is Sasori, and Sasori is one of basically the main bodyguard for Ro, and he basically attacks Nezumi and is like, you shouldn't have come back, and it looks like he's going to kill him, but Shion ends up saving Nezumi, and he has this like wire wrapped around his wrist from when they were climbing the pile, and he has the thought in his head, instead of saying destroy, it says kill him. And so he like wraps the string around the guy's neck and is gonna choke him to death. And he's like, you tried to hurt Nezumi, so I'm gonna kill you. And he looks terrifying. And then Nezumi, of course, convinces him not to do that, and Shion snaps out of it. But it's a kind of a preview to before he kills. We'll get to that. That happens in episode 10. It's kind of like a weird foreshadowing, and Nezumi's like, what are you saying? What are you trying to do? And Shion's like, well, I would kill him if he hurt you. And Nezumi's like having this like, okay, red flag, like Kill Bill sirens going off. And Nezumi's like, I don't want you to kill anybody. And that's the first sign that they're both having these personas of who they are and who they really are inside. And that there's conflict between what they're presenting and what they're actually thinking internally. Because from the start, Nezumi has come across as cold and calculating and apathetic. But as we go through this scene in the cave and as we get into the correctional facility, we realize that no, Nezumi is actually really compassionate and really emotional and really caring, and he wouldn't hurt somebody because he doesn't want to be a murderer and he doesn't want to do that. Whereas Shion comes across as compassionate, calm, and innocent, but in reality, he's the one that has the internal bloodlust that wants to hurt people and murder. And it's like, oh, and this scene here is the start of us realizing, like, these two characters, they're projecting an image of themselves that isn't really how they are inside. And it's like, and all of this is going to come together and come into this turmoil here towards the end. It's really interesting. But yeah, Nezumi tells him, he's like, you're not cut out to be an executioner. And Shion's like, but it would be punishment. It'd be punishment if he hurt you. And Nezumi's like, no, that's not how this works. Like, punishing someone isn't the same as killing someone. He's like, that's a huge thing if you kill someone. He's like, the Shion that I know would never carry out judgment on someone, ever. And he's like, so fight it, Shion, fight yourself. And so Nezumi wants Shion to be like how he sees him, how he's been projecting. And he's like, fight this bloodlust, Shion. He's like, I know you're better than that. It's like, ugh. So we cut back to Regika and Inukashi right before they meet Ro. And we see that she's got the baby. And Inukashi actually names the baby. Names it Shion. Which, as I'm reading the manga, I was starting to get freaked out because I'm like, oh, okay. Inukashi's naming this baby after one of our main characters. Does that mean one of our main characters is going to die? Like, I'm starting to get a little freaked out, right? But it's a really cute scene between Inukashi and Regika trying to figure out what to do with this baby. And they end up kind of tagging along with it for the most part, and then they finally decide to leave the baby with the mama dog as they go to the correctional facility. Thank goodness. But yeah, they get taken to Ro, and they're all tied up, and Shion makes this impassioned speech about how the people in the cave are no different than the people in number 6, and they're basically doing the exact same thing, and the guy gets really mad, and that's when Ro comes out. And as he's coming out, Sasori, he's like, no. He's like, I get it. He's like, you, Shion, you are number 6 incarnate. Like, you are the representation of the city itself, with the bloodlust hiding behind this utopian perfect exterior. And it's like, it's such a cool moment because you're like, oh my god, yeah, Shion is kind of like a human version of number 6 in this moment, because he seems innocent and wonderful and perfect, and deep inside he has this voice telling him to murder and kill and do these horrible things. It's just like the city itself. And so it's a cool metaphor and symbolism there that this man is like making the comparison. And then, of course, before Shion can act on that statement, Nezumi, knocks his feet out from under him. And so we meet Ro, and Nezumi exposes himself and shows us. And the scars are a little different with Nezumi in this. They're like on his lower back instead of in the upper back there. But we get to meet Ro, and Ro basically explains what we know from the anime. It's pretty much the same conversation, beat for beat, and Shion shows himself. He exposes the scars that he has. Ro explains that he went through the same process and was infected by the wasp and was saved. We basically get the same thing that we have in the anime that we do in that scene there. And we get the reveal about the people of the forest too, and it's pretty much the same as the anime as well. But there is this nice moment as Shion's looking at Nezumi's scars where he's like, I wish you'd been more honest with me. And that's a big deal in this last part of the manga, is the idea of these characters being honest with one another and what they're actually thinking. Because up until this point, we've had conflicting conflicting, dialogues. We've had what Nezumi's been thinking in his head versus what he says, and what Shion's thinking in his head versus what he says, and they've been at conflict with one another. And so the whole message in this part leading up to the climax is you need to be honest and you guys need to communicate better. So just like in the anime, Ro gives the chip or the flash drive to Shion and tells him that it contains important information about number 6. And thank goodness the manga treats that flash drive so much better than the anime. We'll get to that. But they decide to go deeper into the correctional facility, and you find out that there's a door at the end of the catacombs that will lead into the correctional facility, and Shion and Nezumi both decide to go in there and save Safu. And from this point on, like, everything's been kind of different a little bit and reorganized and rearranged, but I was curious at this point with volumes 7, 8, 9. I was like, okay, how are we ending this manga, and how is it different than the anime? And it is quite different. We have this moment starting out with volume 7 where Shion is getting kind of into the head of the scientists to try to infiltrate and rescue Safu, and he's like, okay, how would a scientist think? What would they be thinking? When they talk to a scientist, he's like, oh, well, we're here to talk about the samples. And then he kind of gets mad at himself because he's like, I hate that I have to refer to Safu as a sample. And lo and behold, as soon as we get that, we cut to Safu, who is meeting Eurilius for the first time in her mind, and all she can think about is Shion. And there's a really beautiful imagery with the flower and Shion and her hearing Eurilius' voice. And I like that they make Eurilius' voice like a different font in the translations. I like that a lot. But I like the visuals of her reaching out to talk to Shion, and that the hands reaching out is her talking to him, and that's when Shion hears her, and he is like, oh, I hear her voice. And Nezumi's like, wait, you heard whose voice? And at that point, we actually get Nezumi explaining a little bit about his backstory, and that he was raised by his grandmother, and his grandmother, we get that his grandmother didn't trust anybody in number 6, just like Nezumi was brought up to not trust anyone. And we get this cool panel of her telling him, like, don't trust anyone, don't reveal your heart to anyone, that's how you'll get hurt. And all of this, it all makes sense in that moment why Nezumi's been acting the way that he does, because he's been influenced by his grandmother, who was trying to keep him safe all those years ago, because he and her were the last 2 people of the forest surviving. But it's funny because at that moment when he's thinking about his grandmother, he also thinks back to Shion, who was talking to him about the third option. And he's like, my grandmother treated everything as black and white, like there was no good thing, no bad, everything was either good or bad, there was no other option. But Shion, you're the one who brought to my attention that there could be. And so it's like a light goes off in Nezumi's brain. He's like, oh yeah, maybe things don't have to be like this. And as he's thinking that, then him and Shion have a conversation, and Shion kind of says, well, we have to do this or that, there's no other way. And that's when Nezumi's like, but you told me there was a third option. So it's a nice callback to that conversation earlier on. So as Shion and Nezumi are making their way through the correctional facility, a guard catches them and fires at them and accidentally shoots Shion in the leg. And they make a tourniquet and everything seems to be okay. But as they're climbing up the ladder, Nezumi looks down, sees the blood on his hand, and realizes just what kind of danger he's put Shion in going into this correctional facility. And you just know from his dialogue that he's like, Nezumi's like, I know that Shion is going to try to do something crazy to rescue Safu because he cares about her. And he's like, I brought him here. I potentially hurt his psyche, brought out this bloodlust in him. And you can tell Nezumi is really, really conflicted. And it's just like in the anime in episodes 10 and 11, where we start to see that shift between the two of them, where Nezumi starts to reveal his more compassionate self and we don't have to kill these people, and Shion starts to reveal no, we had no choice. And it's like the role reversal is happening. But I will say the manga makes it so much more natural and so much better that when you're reading it, it's all fleshed out, and so it doesn't feel like whiplash. It doesn't feel like it comes out of nowhere. And so it pretty much stays the exact same up until we get to the room. The room where in episode 10 the shootout takes place. It's a little bit different in the manga because they get up to the room and Nezumi was going behind Shion, and Shion looks out the window of the room to a conveyor belt, and there's all these bodies that have had their brains removed. What? I was like, hold up. It gets weird, right? And so Shion is freaked out by what he's seeing, And then that's where that volume ends and we start a new one. And I have to show the color page. I love that we get two sides of the same coin and representing Shion and Nesmi. It's a beautiful color spread. But yeah, a room. And we get confronted by, instead of in episode 10 where it was just a random guard that confronts and shoots Nezumi, no. In this one, it's Rashi. And Rashi was the guy from the security bureau that arrested Shion way back in episode 2. And he's been kind of behind the scenes this whole time. And he's been wanting to bring Shion back to experiment on him. And so, yeah, he's the one that shoots Nezumi. And it has so much more weight in the manga and I get than in the anime. And I get why the anime cut Rashi, because he's not really present or prevalent until the beginning and ending of the series. But in the manga, it's so much more impacting that it's Shion that shoots Rashi. No, what happens is Shion shoots him. Shion takes the gun from Nezumi and shoots him through the heart. And Nezumi thinks he's going to die, and then Shion saves him. And that's when he goes up to Rashi and kills him, and Nezumi begs him not to do it, and he does it anyway. And so it's much more impacting in that moment because it's someone that's more important than just a random guy, but it's still the same emotional weight. Like, you still feel like that horrible weight when Nezumi's like, it's my burden, I've gave him this burden, I made him kill someone, and it's still just as heartbreaking as it is in the anime, but it has more buildup and more weight to it. And so I like that the manga does that and gives it a little bit more meaning, especially after coming out across all the bodies without the brains, which we'll get to that, and its impact. But the big thing is that there's this question of forgiveness, and can you forgive someone when they do something heinous and horrible? And Shion doesn't think that he can be forgiven after he kills Rashi. He has this big coming to grips moment where he questions, I killed someone. And Nezumi has a brief moment where it takes him back to, as he's, having this heartache at what Shion's just done and the fact that he blames himself, he has this flashback where he remembers himself in the forest and his mother teaches him how to sing. Nezumi flashes back and he's like, no. He's like, Shion, you protected me. Don't forget that. And that's when Shion has pretty much a breakdown where he's like, I don't deserve to live. I've killed someone. And Nezumi and him have this back and forth being like, look, you did what you had to do. This was a battlefield. You didn't have a choice. And so their ideologies are all over the place, and they're having to come to terms with, how do you justify killing someone? Is it justifiable? And what do you do? How do you move forward from that? And so it's this really interesting conversation between these two as they try to rationalize and work through it. And it gets really scary and dark for a second because Shion has the gun still in his hand and he's like, Nezumi, I killed this man. I don't know why, but without hesitation or regret, I was able to kill someone. How can that be forgiven? Should it be forgiven? And Nezumi's like, and then Shion literally is about to shoot himself in the head because he's like, I don't think that I deserve to live. And Nezumi stops him and he's like, no, and manages to keep him from doing anything. But it is a gut-wrenching scene. It's one of the saddest scenes in the whole manga because it's really dealing with this horrible issue of, what do you do? How do you feel? Can you justify it? Are you worthy of forgiveness? And how do you expect people around you to forgive you? And so it's this big, impactful moment. And I get why they had to shorten it in the anime, but I don't know. If I had seen that, and I get that censoring it, I don't know if you could show that in an anime, him just holding the gun up to his head, and it's just such a grisly scene. Nezumi tells him basically to just bear it, live on. He's like, I made you bear this burden, but I'm sorry. And he starts to cry, and there's this really, really tender moment where Shion reaches up to him, and he's like, this is the first time I've seen you cry. And Nezumi's just shedding tears because he feels so bad for what's happened to him. And it's just drawn really, really well. Shion's like, we were brought here to rescue Safu. And that's when the voice comes back. And that's when Shion starts getting back into the mode of, let's go rescue. And Nezumi's like, who are you? What is going on? And they agree to go up the elevator. And Shion makes a comment. He's like, Safu's drawing us to her. And Nezumi's like, that's not normal. Normal people can't do that, but okay, we're in rescue mode. Let's go. And Nezumi makes the comment offhanded because he's kind of jealous in the moment. He's like, oh, we're going to go rescue your girlfriend. And Shion doesn't really respond to it. But there's this moment in the elevator as they're going up, and I've included the panel here, but it reminds me a lot of Banana Fish, because he has this moment where he's like, this is the first time I've seen you cry. He's like, I can only feel love towards you, Nezumi. He's like, not friendship, not admiration, nor is it romance or respect. It's just love. And that struck me very much like Garden of Light, Banana Fish vibes. And I know the mangaka has been influenced by Banana Fish, you can tell, but just that it's like beyond soulmates. Like Shion and Nezumi, they're like connected. They're like yin and yang, two sides of the same coin. And it's a really, really beautiful moment. But yeah, then we go up to meet Safu. And right before they meet Safu at the top of the elevator, there is a short cut scene where we go back to Shion's mother and Yaoman's niece, and they're in the bakery, and it pops up on the TV that there are these riots happening in number 6. Like, the people are starting to revolt. Like, Yaoman's plan is getting put into motion to start this revolution, and the mad scientist basically calls the military to come in and take care of business, and they do come in and start attacking the citizens of number 6, and the mom like shields Yaoman's niece from seeing people dying on screen on the television. But it's just a nice reminder that while this stuff's going on in the correctional facility, stuff is happening outside that's just as bad. But yeah, back to the brain room. As soon as I saw this image of Safu and the brains, I was like, oh no. I was getting, again, Banana Fish vibes, and all I could think about was the brain room in episode, I think it's 15 of Banana Fish, with Shorter's brain. That's all I could think about. And then from that moment in the manga on, I was like, oh, she was never there to begin with. Because in the anime, she shows up with the sweater and stuff on, and you're like, oh, well, there's Safu. But in the manga, you've seen her in this test tube and in the tank, and she's naked, and you're like, well, then where'd she get the sweater and the skirt? Because that's not what she wore when she was taken by the security bureau. And then it all clicked, and I was like, oh, she's not there. It's just an illusion. And I'm like, they took out her brain. And that's what they did. And this is all just an illusion. And it was like, oh my God. And in the anime, I didn't realize that because things were happening so fast. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. In the manga, I was like, oh no. And so Shion admits that he does love Nezumi. And Shion makes the comment that he's heard Safu's voice in his head. But Nezumi makes the comment that he heard a voice too as soon as they arrive. But it's not human. He doesn't hear Safu. He hears a non-human voice. And I'm like, oh my God, Eurilius is like possessed her and like using her to get to Shion. And so yeah, we have the room with the brains. And Shion goes up to her. And he makes the note that her appearance has changed. He's like, you're safe. You're good. And at first he doesn't notice it at first. But then he makes the notice that he's like, why are you dressed like that? Where's Eurilius? And she's like, oh, I don't know. She must be nearby, though. And Nezumi's like speaking to you face to face, Eurilius, or did you just hear her? And Safu's kind of coy with Nezumi, like she kind of gets that he's catching on, but Shion's like in total denial at this point. Safu leads them to the main part of the room where we see what's called Mother. And I wanted to make this note that, one, there is a neat connection between both Nezumi and Safu, that both of them, their only family were their grandmothers until number 6 took them away from them. That's the first note. That's the crazy thing. But second, it's the fact that there's the mother in the correctional facility, and in the moon drop there's the grandmother, which is another version of Eurilius. And so, or another version of the computer that's trying to harness Eurilius. And so it's a neat callback that Safu's the one that is the vessel for Eurilius, when her and her grandmother have this big connection, and there's the connection between the mother and the grandmother. It's just interesting. I find it very interesting. But yeah, Nezumi catches on that something's up, and Shion starts to question. He's like, why are you wearing your grandmother's sweater? Like, why do you have that here? Like, you look different. You don't look exactly like Safu now. You look younger. What's up? And that's when she's like, I just wanted to show you the version of you that I think is best for you. And Nezumi's like, she's an illusion. She is not here. It is all Eurilius. Your friend does not exist anymore. And that's not what Shion wanted to hear. But yeah, Shion tries to move towards Safu, and she backs away really quick. Like, she doesn't want him touching her. And Nezumi's like, she's an illusion. That's why you can't touch her, and that's why she's moving away. And Shion is in denial. Nezumi keeps trying to tell him that she's not real anymore, and Shion doesn't believe it. And Safu makes the comment that I wanted to show you the version of me that you'd remember best. And Shion's like, why would you want me to remember you? He doesn't realize that she's dead. He just thinks that something's up and she's somewhere else. She's just not in front of them. And Nezumi's like, mm-mm. And Nezumi makes the comment, he's like, look, she doesn't exist. Look at where we are. And that's when they see all the brains in the tube. And us, the audience, can make the inference that the operation they did was they took Safu's brain out and did the experiments on that. And it's like, ugh. So chapter 29, we get this Jujutsu Kaisen fake out nonsense where it shows Shion taking Safu through their apartment in the West Block. And it's the most heartbreaking thing because he shows her around and shows her the library, shows her all the books, shows her all the Shakespeare, and then he gets to the point of the little dining room area in the apartment, and she's like, why did you bring me here? And he's like, this was my starting point. He's like, I started off in this room. This is where I died and was reborn, and I wanted to show it to you. And it's such a symbolic, like, the apartment was where Shion died and was reborn with the white hair. They're in the brain room now where Safu died and was reborn as Aurelius. It's like, oh my gosh. It's just the connections are. And then there's that moment in Shion's head where he's like, nothing can replace you. You're so important to me. And it's like, ugh! And so Safu basically states in the manga that she wants the correctional facility destroyed so that Aurelius can be freed. And that Safu is going to lead them to where they need to go do that. And so Nezumi's like, okay, on board with this. This is your last request. Let's go. But Shion is totally out of it. Like, he just doesn't understand what's going on. And Safu leads them to the room where they can destroy the computer. And there's this really creepy moment where as the correctional facility is blowing up, Safu hears Aurelius, and Aurelius asks Safu and says, are you satisfied with what happened? And Safu has this moment where she's like, not really, because she's like, she's basically jealous that Nezumi gets to stay with Shion. She's like, why does he get to stay with him? It's not fair. And Aurelius says the line, she says, do you want Shion to die together with you? And for a second I was like, oh my God, is this goddess going to kill Shion? I was like, is that how the manga ends differently? And luckily, thankfully, Safu says no. She's like, I want him to live on and change number 6 for the better. She's like, I want him to live on and live a full life. And I was like, oh, thank God, Safu, because if you had been really jealous and asked Shion to die, that would have been pretty messed up. But yeah, so basically the things that happen next in the manga are pretty much beat for beat what happens in episode 11 of the anime in the first part, in that they're going down the elevator. Shion goes through the 5 stages of grief like in the span of 10 minutes. And they still have that same argument that they have in the anime, but it is much better explained and much more deserved when they have it in this, because you've had that time in the manga to spread out that conversation with Safu as Aurelius, and Shion, you get to see that he's going through all these stages of grief and denial and finally coming to grips with the fact that she's gone and that they weren't able to rescue her. And he blames Nezumi, and then he apologizes and blames himself, and they just have this big conversation, and it's pretty much exactly like the anime. And then just like in the anime, one of the guards, as the people are fleeing the building that's blowing up, one of the guards spots them and shoots at Shion, and Nezumi jumps in to save him. And then we hard cut back to Yaoman telling Shion's mom the plans. There's supposedly a vaccine that's been made for the wasp infestation, and he's going to go public with that. It's like, okay. And then we cut back to Inakashi and Regika continuing to move in the correctional facility and trying to get out of there as it's blowing up. And we get Yaoman's brother-in-law has been a side character this whole time, like working behind the scenes in the correctional facility, and he ends up dying. And so he's a character that we lose. But Inakashi has a really cool moment where Inakashi, take Nezumi's words to heart and is like, no, I'm going to survive because Nezumi said that Nezumi would make fun of me if I died now. And it's like, oh, okay. Chapter 31 starts with Shion basically trying to bandage up and heal Nezumi. And I like that the manga goes into much more detail because in the anime it happens so quickly that you don't really get time to focus on it. But in this, Shion, it shows him like going through the steps, like, okay, how do I stop the bleeding? How do I repair? How do I bandage the wound until we can get him to a hospital? And he makes the important revelation that, yeah, Nezumi's going to die if we don't get him to a hospital. And I'm like, oh, okay, we're being slightly realistic with this. And so he manages to get, Shion does not get shot in the manga. He doesn't get shot like in the anime. I was like, oh, okay. He doesn't get shot. They go down the garbage chute. He takes Nezumi with him, and he meets up with Inakashi and Regika, and he's like, we need to go to a hospital now. I need some keys to the vehicle that you guys drove to get here. And it's like, what are we doing, manga? And so, yeah, they manage to get out, and they convince Inakashi and Regika to go with him to a hospital to get Nezumi patched up. And I'm like, huh. So what are we doing, manga? So the manga really extends the ending of this. Like the big climax, you think it's the correctional facility blowing up, but it's not. We've not got to the climax yet. And I'm like, okay, story, let's keep going. The Holy Day ceremony and celebration is happening in number 6 while the correctional facility is burning down, just like in anime. And just like in the anime, the daughter senses that something's wrong, and the mom, Shion's mom, is like trying to protect her. So it's very similar to the anime in that regard. But they get Nezumi to a doctor in number 6. They take him into number 6, which Inakashi and Regika are like, why are we going in the city? And Shion's like, we have no choice. So they manage to get him into number 6 to a hospital. And it comes to find out that the doctor where he goes to, the doctor is someone that does not believe that number 6 is good. He's like, everything is falling apart in this city. He's like, I've never liked the city to begin with. He says that his brother died after committing suicide because number 6 wronged him. And so the doctor's all on Shion's side. And so they take Nezumi back and work on him. And it's like, it's such a big relief in that moment, because I was fully expecting the doctor to just turn on them and say, no, I'm not going to help Nezumi. He's not from the city. But he ends up saving his life, which is amazing. And so in the midst of all this, while Nezumi is having surgery, we cut to the crazy mad scientist who's like going on about like, what are they talking about, a vaccine? We don't have a vaccine. And then they announce to him that the correctional facility is on fire, and he gets super, super ticked off, and he decides to go after Yaoman and the underground group, thinking that it was their responsibility that the correctional facility was on fire. He thinks it was their fault and doesn't realize it was Shion and Nezumi that caused it all. So we cut to them in the hospital, and Shion is just really devastated because he doesn't know if Nezumi's going to make it through the surgery. And it's so sweet. He's like, I just want to hear his voice. I just want to hear him sing one more time. And then while Shion is waiting to find out what happened with Nezumi, he takes the flash drive and finds a computer there in the hospital and looks up the files. And I was like, yes! Because in the anime, he just crushes the flash drive. And I'm like, what was the whole point of the flash drive to begin with if you're just going to crush it? But in the manga, he actually uses it to find out what's been going on with Aurelius. What has number 6 been planning this entire time? And so he finds out all this information. And while that happens, the doctor comes out and says the surgery was a success and Nezumi's going to be okay. And that's when we get the backstory about the doctor's brother committing suicide and why he's against number 6 and why he's willing to help Shion. And Inakashi likens number 6 to a fat bloated vampire, and the doctor's like, that's a pretty accurate description. And it's a really good moment. But Shion goes up to see Nezumi and check on him, and he turns the corner and there's Yaoman standing there. And it's like, with a friggin' crow on his shoulder, and it's like, wait, why is Yaoman there? And then it comes to find out that the doctor is part of the underground movement with Yaoman, and it's like, okay, we're connecting these people in this organizations together. And then again, the banana fish parallels. Shion goes into the hospital room and sees Nezumi sitting there in bed. It's so like Ash and Eiji. And he like touches his hand and says that he just wants to see his eyes open again, to see his quote unquote lively eyes again. And he has this moment of reflection where he's like, I talked about bursting down the walls between number 6 and West Block. And he's like, you're right, Nezumi. He's like, if that happens, yeah, there's going to be turmoil and bitterness from both sides. What's that world going to be like? And then as he's thinking that, Nezumi like pops up out of bed and he tells them all to turn off the lights and to get down. And it's like, where's this come from? But they do it. And then we find out that the reason Nezumi asked them to turn off the lights is because he had a vision that the security bureau was coming, and we can assume it's from Aurelius, but he had a vision that the security bureau was coming to the hospital because they found out that's where Yaman was hiding, and it's exactly what happens. They raid the hospital and they kill the doctor, and Yaman somehow escapes. And our crew end up being okay after all is said and done, but you can just see how distraught Nezumi is at all the death and destruction around him, and he thinks that it's all his fault. And Inakashi and Regika are wanting answers of what's going on, so they have to explain Aurelius to them and what all's been happening. And this panel of Nezumi just crumpled and looking defeated is so, so sad. But it's like, as they're sitting there in the raided hospital trying to figure out what to do next, we get this vision and see just Aurelius wreaking havoc on number 6 and killing people left and right because she's like calling them monsters and saying that they're all horrible. And then that's when Shion reveals to Inakashi and Regika what he found on the flash drive. And what he finds out is that on the flash drive, Rao had showed him that in the forest, Nezumi's people would have sacrifices to Aurelius, where they would sing songs of praise to Aurelius and sing songs to calm Aurelius down, and they would take the brains of animals to serve as what they called a divine nest, where they would use the brain of an animal as a host for all of her offspring, and the wasps would come from that, and they would just keep doing that cycle of singing and sacrificing to appease Aurelius. And so we get the revelation that the scientists were trying to recreate that divine nest, and so they were using human brains instead of animal brains and sacrificing people to try to harness Aurelius's power, and it obviously backfired on them. And so Shion has the plan that he's like, Nezumi, you're the last person of the forest. You know the songs that will calm her down. So let's go to the center of the city and you can sing this song to her and hopefully reach out to her and get her to stop destroying everything. And so that's the plan. Inakashi and Regika think they're crazy, but they're like, this is the only option we have at this point because this literal goddess is wreaking havoc on the city. So they go to the middle of town hall where Yaoman is. Yaoman managed to escape the hospital, and he's in the middle of town hall and is trying to incite this riot. And I love this panel because while Yaoman is being like, talking about this vaccine that doesn't exist and all this crazy stuff, like Shion goes up to the center of the city and shows that he's a survivor, and he's like, no. Shion's like, there is no vaccine. This isn't something you can cure. It's literally the power of a goddess, and I'm going to show you what it is. And he reveals himself as a survivor, and it's like, it's a nice callback to all these times previously in the manga where he's been afraid to expose himself, and he's like, no, I'm going to expose myself to help save everybody. And it's like, it's a great moment. And then they managed to convince Yaoman to let them in to City Hall to get on the top balcony. And it's this glorious parallel to Shion at the beginning of episode 1 where he opened up the balcony and was screaming out into the night, screaming out into the typhoon, into the storm. We see Nezumi standing on the balcony in a similar way to reach out to Aurelius and sing to her. And it's beautiful. Like, he sings out to her, and it's this beautiful panel, like asking for her to accept his song and to hear him out. And then Shion has this moment where he's like, Safu, give me strength. And they kind of both reach out at the same time. And then we get Safu / Aurelius appearing as the wasp goddess. And in the final chapters, I love this color spread where it shows Nezumi and Shion together. It's like, that's probably my, other than volume 3, where it's Nezumi as Ophelia, this is probably my other favorite color spread. It's just so good. And so, yeah, Nezumi sings out the song. The mad crazy scientist tries to stop him, but we come to find out he's been infected too and didn't know it, and he dies. It's like, cool, see ya, bye. And then Aurelius pops up, and she's like, why should I stop my destruction? He's like, you all are hypocrites and monsters. And Nezumi is like, he's like, there is good in humanity, and I want to see what that good can do. And he uses Shion as an example. He's like, I want to see what Shion will do for number 6 to make it better. And he's like, I just ask you to stop all this destruction. And she's not quite convinced, but I like Nezumi adds, he's like, also, you're not omnipotent. He's like, wouldn't it be amusing to see what they do next? And it's like, just trying to tease her. And with Safu's convincing as well, she ends up saying like, okay, this once, I'll let y'all go. And it's like, okay. And so it all like comes together at the end beautifully where we have this moment of the mom reuniting with all of them. Nezumi with his hair down, looks awesome. But Nezumi tells Shion, he's like, you saved my life that night. Like, that stormy night, you opened the window and let me in and saved my life. And Shion's like, but wait. Shion has the call back where he's like, on that stormy night, I wanted to scream. I wanted to be free. Was that why I opened the window? No. He's like, I was being called by you and your song. So it's like they were connected to one another that evening. And it's like, ugh. I like really fangirled in this moment in the chapter because it was like, yeah, they both were calling out to each other. It's like red string of fate, like soulmates, everything. He's like, you called for me and I heard your voice. It's like, ugh. And they call him a singer. Eurilius calls Nezumi a singer, one of the singer, people of the forest. But yeah, the mom reunites with all of them. It's not, and she doesn't leave the little girl by herself. The little girl's mom shows up, and I was like, oh, thank goodness. They didn't just leave that little girl all by herself after all this death and destruction. No, the little girl's mom comes back. Nezumi and Shion reunite with Shion's mother. It's wonderful, and it reminded me a lot of Full Metal Alchemist when Winry hugs Ed and Alphonse, and it's just a really good moment. And then there's this beautiful shot paralleling, the first episode where they both pass out in the bed side by side with one another. It's like... And then we cut to the next morning, and there's this really, really cute scene, and I'm not going to show it to you on here. You need to look it up and read it yourself, but it's really cute where Shion wakes up and he thinks Nezumi's left, but instead he's just made breakfast, and you find out that Nezumi talked with Shion's mom, and they really hit it off. Like, they are good friends, and Nezumi makes a comment. He's like, I love your mother. I didn't know people like that existed here in number 6, and it's like, so good. But then, yeah, so unlike the ending of the anime, Nezumi decides that he needs to go off and go exploring and find out more about the people of the forest, if there's any extra survivors, what he can find out from Ro, because Ro's decided to live out in the forest with the other survivors now, kind of mimicking the original people of the forest. And Nezumi's like, I need to go out and figure things out, and I'll be gone for a while. And Shion gets really sad. He's like, I don't know what to do without you. And he's like, you're going to help rebuild number 6. He's like, but I can't be a part of that. He's like, I don't want to be a part of rebuilding number 6, but you need to be, because you're going to be the good influence. And Inukashi and Regika end up keeping the child named Shion and raising it, which I was like, yes, that's what I wanted in the anime. I'm like, I wanted them to platonically be a couple, like a platonic couple raising the child, and they are. I'm like, it's wonderful. Shion's like, I don't want you to leave, and Nezumi leans down and kisses him, and it's such a good shot. And he's like, Shion goes, is that a goodbye kiss? And he's like, no, it's a promise. It's a promise that I'm going to return. And it's like, it's so good. It's so good. And Shion's like, Nezumi, I'll wait for you. And then it cuts to 3 years later, and baby Shion is like grown up into a toddler. Regika and Inukashi are raising him. And then it shows Shion like as a young adult, and he opens up the window to the house, and the wind blows in, and he's like, I'm ready for you to come in, Nezumi, just like you did that night. And it's like they're going to reunite and see each other, and it's like, it's so, so good. So, yeah. After I've gushed about this, the question is, I think the manga, what it does well is it extends all these moments that the anime couldn't. And it really makes me sad because I like the anime a lot. I like the anime for what it does, and I don't know the circumstance of why it had to be 11 episodes, but I think it does well with what it has to work with. But man, you couldn't have added one more episode or or something to expand on this. But I like that. I think the manga helps fill in the gaps more and makes the moments feel more deserved and earned, especially the good moments. And then the tension between Nezumi and Shion feels more genuine because you had more time to flesh out their characters. So in regards to which I prefer, it's such a hard question, but I do think I prefer the manga because of how expanded it is. I'm still glad that I watched the anime. I'm really glad that I saw it. And I highly recommend, if you've watched the anime and you're curious about the manga, go read the manga. Because honestly, the ending of the anime was fine, but the ending of the manga is a little more bittersweet, but I like it more. So if you've not read the manga, I highly recommend it. There's only 9 volumes, so it's not a long read. It's really good and sweet, and it's just overall, it's just a story that I'm really glad that I watched and that I read. So yeah, this soapbox feels like it was all over the place, but then again, I had so many notes and so many thoughts, and I left out some things because I do want you to go read the manga. And I obviously, if I talked about it word for word, it would be like a 4-hour soapbox, but I do feel like this was a little scattered. So we are going to do a live stream. There's information about the live stream down below. We are going to do a live stream and talk about this series, and hopefully then I can kind of air out my thoughts with you all, and you guys chime in with your thoughts as well. So with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this soapbox. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you go out and watch number 6, the anime, and I hope you go read number 6, the manga as well. But later this week, we'll start the new show that's replacing this series. I'm going to talk about it in the live stream. But until then, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon with more reactions.